One of my huge passions in life, and has been ever since I was a little girl, I think my mom and dad inspired me, is gardening. So today that's what I want to talk to you about, is what I do on my little front yard, which used to be all grass, and what I've been doing over the years to bring me joy. And gardening doesn't have to be intimidating. In fact, I want to start off, for those of you that are really beginners, and forgive me all the accomplished gardeners, because I know there's a lot of you. I just wanted to show you some of the basic tools that I'd recommend you get. It doesn't have to be expensive, and there's times to shop when things are on sale. But one of my favorite tools is a simple hand fork. Again, a good shovel. Now mine is very sharp on the end, and this is something over time that I would recommend getting, a really good shovel. For those of you that do have grass, you need an edger. This is going to give you a polished, clean look, and again, it's really sharp on the one side. And then something to carry water. Okay, I have a pretty fancy watering can. You can use a bucket, it doesn't matter. Gloves, sun protection, water, good shoes, and you are good to go. Nothing has to be fancy. Gardening is for everybody. So I designed my own front garden kind of out of need. I raised two boys and always felt like we needed grass to play ball on and be active. But once they got to a certain age, I thought, you know what, I want to do something for me. I'm in Toronto, and there's an area called Cabbagetown, and the gardens there always inspired me. They date back to probably the late 1700s, so a little bit more formal and an English influence, and a little tidier too. So that's what I based my center garden on. When we did a reno and the whole front was torn up, I thought, okay, now it's mama time. So I started to create a formal circle, and the center is grounded by a pot, a 4-season professional pot. So every season I change that center pot depending on, you know, what the theme is. Sometimes it's Christmas, sometimes it's spring. Right now we're summertime, so that kind of is my always changing centerpiece. And then I created a circle of little lime hydrangeas, and then another open circle of boxwood. And this is on year 3 now, so just to give you an idea, don't get discouraged when you plant, because generally I would say it takes at least 3 years to kind of really see what's happening. So little lime hydrangeas are exactly that. Little, they don't go crazy a lot. There's so many hydrangeas out there, and they're one of my absolute favorite flowers. But I knew I wanted to have some form of structure, and these don't get too big. So this is going to be one of my picks. If you were to ask me in Canada, in the Toronto area, what's one of your flowers you love? I'm in love with hydrangea. Little limes start off a soft chartreuse tone, and then they turn gradually pink. I love the long stem that's perfectly straight, because if you're a cut flower girl like I am, you will love these. They're fantastic, and they dry beautifully as well. But they won't get too big, and they're very easy to maintain. Again, I'm focusing on circular shape. I'm not planting in every single space. And you can see I chose boxwood. Now, there's a big problem with the boxwood moth or the caterpillar. You can spray for it with BTK, and it helps. But if you want to use an Ontario native, it would be the inkberry, which, to be honest with you, probably now I would choose. But when I planted this garden, boxwood were the traditional formal, and that's what I went for. So these are on year 3, and I'm going to let them grow a little bit more, and then we're going to shape them so that they have more of a clean presence to them, because I'm trying to do something a little bit tidier in this garden. So again, I'm still waiting. That's going to be a little bit of time. Now, just for the beginner gardeners that are tuning in right now, thank you for tuning in. I just want to say, no question is a dumb question. Gardening is fun. It's like painting with flowers. That's how I describe it. I have a sister who's an artist, and I always say, you paint with paint, I paint with flowers. But there's perennials and there's annuals. So what I'm talking to you about right now are perennials, and these are investment plants, foundation plants that will come up every year. Annuals are the ones that I add in for color and for fun, and those are the ones that will only last the season. And I am a big fan of both. I think that they contribute to a beautiful garden. So we talked about our beautiful hydrangea. We talked about having a center pot, a focal point. I used a very common mandevilla, which you can even find at some grocery stores. And what I like to do with the mandevilla is often they come kind of pre-packaged on these little climber things. I take them out very carefully and I stake my own. I find that if you give a plant an opportunity, it will grow more if you give it the space. So this guy's getting thicker and he's starting to climb up, and hopefully by the end of the summer I'll have something a real focal point. You can never go wrong with color, you can never go wrong with white. In a pot, you want to focus on height, you want to focus on the center, and then you want to focus on, where are you? Trailing. So something trailing. So those three. And you know what? We'll talk more about pots in probably another video. I just wanted to show you some of the work that I've done. And once you've planted these and they establish themselves, honestly, it's just a little bit of deadheading or removing the dead. It's very easy, and I do fertilize every once in a while, but it's not a big deal. So this looks like it was a lot of work, but it wasn't. It's not at all. So this is my front garden, the formal section. And what I'm trying to do is actually have negative space, meaning space where there isn't a garden as well. I wanted to have a place where the eye could rest. I noticed in some of my formal gardens that's what they had. So that's what I've been focusing on here. And then I'd start adding in some interesting perennials. If I may bring your attention over here for a sec. One of the things that one of my sisters taught me to do, she's a horticulturalist, so you can imagine all the information I get from her is whenever you choose a plant, yes, you want to choose it for the flower, of course, but also really look at the leaf or the foliage, because what's so important is that one day that flower will be spent and you'll deadhead it and it'll die and it'll be gone, and then you've got to live with the plant. So when you pick something that's interesting, like this one with this creamy ivory and the variegated leaf, it really then stands out on its own because you love the foliage. It doesn't matter whether it's got a flower on it or not. So that is one tip I would absolutely say to think about when you're investing in perennials for your garden. Where you can, and come on over here, I'll show you another example. Where you can, choose something because it's got interesting foliage. These are my zinnias, which are being eaten by slugs right now, just to show you that, there's challenges all the time. Gardening is a little bit of an experiment. That's okay. Here's another example of, these are irises. And if you're not familiar with irises, think of Van Gogh. Think of those great works of art, Van Gogh's irises. Not his ear, the irises. And this is a very pretty purple iris. But what we did here was I chose one that wasn't just green, because it is so nice to have more than green in a garden. And sometimes a garden will be too green. Does that make sense to you? It sounds funny. How can anything be too green? It's just nice to choose things that have more color than green on them. And that's another example here. Over here, the hostas, another example where I'm trying to pick foliage that has more than just green. And actually, while we're on this shot, I have to point this out. So hostas are a perennial, and they do bloom at various times. Normally I would cut the flowers off these, but I've left them for a little bit because, and you may want to move in up close for this, the bee activity on these is so amazing that I just couldn't cut them off because there's so many bees. It's all about pollination over here, and it's so wonderful, especially in the early morning when I'm out here. I talk to them. Is that weird that I talk to the bees? I guess it's weird if they answer back, but you know what? I can just tell they're happy. So me, the tidy gardener, will leave these because I can see how much the bees are enjoying them. So that's another thing as I ramble on to all of you. I don't think there's any hard, fast rules, and you find what works for you. I think that's the most important thing. Some plants will do well in some spots, others won't, and that's okay. You experiment with it. Well, there you have it, a little taste of my garden. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Tanya, this is Rose, and this is Lakin. And yes, when I garden and I do anything in my house, I have to think about the well-being of dogs and wear and tear. So that's what I'm going to focus on in my YouTube channel, and I hope that you'll join me. And also, if you have any suggestions as we go along, I'm going to take you in the house and show you some of the projects that I like to do that make me happy, because that in the end is what it's all about, finding beauty in every day.